Alrighty, so we're gonna go to Likely because there's a lot to talk about. Gold Rush trip. So visit Horsefly. So Horsefly, 1859, it was discovered, gold was discovered on the Horsefly River, placer gold. Big gold rush ensued. Likely was initially called Quesnel Dam because they wanted to get rid of some of the water so they could mine the Bullion Pit and other placer claims as well. Funny thing is though, is that it's kind of a juxtaposition a little bit because they needed to dam Quesnel River, which is why Likely was initially called Quesnel Dam. But then they needed water to use for water monitoring, right? So they had to build a system of canals, siphon from Holly Lake and various other lakes around. And then they changed the name after one of the workers in the Bullion Pit, John A. Likely. He was kind of a philosopher kind of a guy. So they changed the name to him. He was a prospector. They honored him with the name Likely, BC. But it was Quesnel Dam. And it's kind of funny that they had to dam the river to kind of to get rid of some of the water so they could actually placer mine, because the type of placer mining they were doing in one area actually required water. So it's kind of a weird thing. But anyways, they had to build canals, and this canal system, it had like 120 employees, 30-something bunkhouses, and various buildings for assisting. Like they had lock operators, so guys would be running the locks to control the flow coming to the water monitors. And a water monitor is basically like, it's a pipe it's a graduated pipe that comes down to a small kind of orifice, and then high pressure water using head pressure, which is the weight of water, you know, with gravity basically, is what gives it its pressure. A lot of Chinese, this is the junction, so if you continued straight, you'd go to Horsefly, and obviously taking a left will take you to Lake. Right? So here we go. So Horsefly had its own gold rush, and then Likely had its own gold rush. All part of the Cariboo gold rush itself, right? The Cariboo gold rush had various phases. But Quesnel Forks, it's a big Chinese community of merchants, basically, and they were supplying the gold fields. So there's actually in the Quesnel Museum, they have a whole bunch of Chinese artifacts, old Chinese games, Chinese money that they would use to gamble with, because the Chinese and the white miners didn't associate with each other. So the Chinese would typically hang out in stores and gamble, and they would have their own money, Chinese mint coins that they would use, but they were basically worthless outside of like Chinese shops, gambling and stuff. Chinese are also very good miners. Some of the most thorough, precise miners in the world, actually, Chinese. The white miners would come in. Well, the natives knew where all the diggings were. They were doing their mining as they needed. The white prospectors came in, found the same veins and prospects that the natives had been using. They came, took their fill, left, went on to the next site, and then the Chinese would come in after and get rid of, or take up whatever was left. And you'd think, oh, you know, like everybody says, oh, those old prospectors were very good. And yeah, they were very good. They didn't miss much. But even still, even with all their skill, the Chinese miners would come in after, Chinese prospectors, and they would clean up. They would go places that the white people would never go, and they'd clean up tons and tons and tons of gold. And the Bullion Pit was initially a Chinese claim. And then the CPR, basically a bunch of rich barons, Shaughnessy and Van Horn and all those kind of guys, they had a big surplus of money from the CPR because they're swimming filthy rich in money. So they wanted a business venture where they could like use some of the money to make more money, you know, typical investor kind of thing. And so they bought the Bullion Pit from the Chinese, and then they hired this guy, John Beauregard Hobson, an Irishman. He was a mining engineer from California, worked in the mines in California. And mining engineering was, back in the day, that was the way to make a living in BC. During all the gold rushes, if you were a mining engineer, you'd be so busy you wouldn't even know what to do with yourself. The Bullion Pit that we're going to go see, this is J.B. Hobson's baby. He died on this job. This job was the last job he did. This was his baby, so he designed the canal system, he designed the lock system, he designed the hydraulic water monitor setup, because it's hydraulic placer mining is what it's called, right? So you have like hand panning, you've got sluicing, right, either with a rocker box or just like a regular sluice, or you've got hydraulic placer mining, which is kind of like sluicing, except you're just using a hose to shoot water at a bank and wash the bank down, wash the bank off, and then it goes through a set of ripples, like gold ripples, and collects the gold, and they just keep doing that, right? They clean They clean the mats out and stuff and get their things. The CPR didn't want their money getting stolen, so what he did, it was actually pretty ingenious, was they made it into a massive 300-pound bullet shape, and then nobody could take it, because when you pack your horses back in the day, horses wanted to be evenly weighted. So if you stole a 300-pound piece of bullion, you had to steal another 300-pound piece of bullion to weight it out. We're actually going to pass a place called Hydraulic. Yeah, I've heard two things on that. I can imagine that would be for like hydraulic placer mining as a homage to that. But I also heard another story about, it was actually to do with the hydraulic baskets. They were using hydraulically powered baskets over there, and so that's why it's called hydraulic. Quesnel Lake is right in the Quesnel Highlands, so we're now transitioning out of the plateau. You'll see it'll start to get hilly again here, and we're now moving into the Quesnel Highlands. There's a set of lakes around here that they diverted. They hand dug the canals. They're 7 feet deep, 6 feet wide. Hand digging for kilometers and kilometers, and then built a series of locks. And they actually, because it was in the 1890s, they had a telephone, not a telegraph, a telephone. Quesnel, Barkerville, Hazelton, like there's a telegraph line that ran through here, the Cariboo telegraph. That's in the 1860s, 70s. That's how they communicated up and down the Cariboo wagon rails, by telegraph. And that was so they could talk to the lock operators and let them know more pressure or less pressure. We are 3 minutes out of the Bullion Pit, 3 kilometers away. Absolutely gorgeous here, guys. Lots of bugs, though, even in October. And those guys would work all day in these rivers and on the canals, panning and digging those canals in bug nets. Like the heat of summer. Like, it's like absolutely brutal. World famous Bullion Pit mine in Lakely, BC. Go. I don't make this stuff up, guys. On the left. I know at times it seems like I do, but I know if only I could be that creative. The drop pit, or known the Bullion Pit, named after Drop Creek, which runs through the trench. The drop pit was hydraulically excavated by bullion placers over a 2-year period using modern monitors, which blasted away over 1 billion cubic yards of overburden to create the canyon that now stands before you. The much larger Bullion Pit has been called an everlasting testimony to man's thirst for gold. From the vantage point of the Bullion viewpoint, you can see a man-made scar 2 miles long. At an average depth of 400 feet, the pit is deeper than Hotel Vancouver, and that structure could be buried there 20 times. The valley floor is 250 feet wide, and the facing rims over 1,000 feet across. Bedrock layer on which the ancient river channel is buried lies 110 feet higher than the nearby Quesnel River. By 1935, the Bullion mine was again the largest hydraulic operation in the province, employing the largest hydraulic monitor on the continent. The amount of water available allowed 16 hours of piping time, after which 8 hours of the day was spent drilling and blasting boulders. Old road to Quesnel Forks. Old Bullion town site. The Bullion Pit. The Quesnel River. In 1938, the Bullion Pit and the South Fork Pit were connected, and by 1940, work began on the drop pit using specially designed 11.5 nozzle. By July of the following year, however, returns to the drop pit were lower than anticipated, and intentions were returned to the Bullion. In 1942, the minister stated the equipment has been removed, and it's understood that it's been disposed. Gold was first discovered on the Quesnel River in the fall of '59. American miners following the Fraser River Gold Rush a year earlier. The Gulch was named after its founder, Thomas Dancing Bill Latham. His company was doing so well that it reported that year that it was taking out as much as 110 per day with a hand rocker. Almost 7 ounces of gold. As rich as this was, greater discoveries made in the following years further north drew white miners and a group of Chinese miners, as originally the Ong Mon and later the Hop E Tong companies later occupied the site using primitive hydraulic methods, washed out an estimated 200,000 of gold, 12,500 ounces. Originally called the Cariboo Hydraulic Mining Company, by 1893 it had purchased the interests of South Fork and Hop E Tong companies. The estimated cost of construction Hobson's project would cost $300,000. Astronomical in those days. By 97, the company had dug 19 miles of canal outlets from Bootjack and Polly Lakes and had increased its capacity to 5 million. Renamed Consolidated Cariboo Hydraulic Mining Company, it employed more than 150. The following year, an additional $118,000 was spent to build a dam and construct a 10-mile canal outlet from Moorhead Lake to supply more water. In 1905, however, following a 4-year drought, the company operated only 14 days. To secure more water, Hobson went to New York, persuaded the Guggenheim Exploration Company to purchase the property. Spanish lady. The ingots, the riveted pipes, the penstocks, the head of the monitors, penstocks, the lookout, the Bullion Pit lookout. You can see the Bullion Pit below grade. So this is the water monitor. You got 2 90-degree elbows, a bit of a reducer, actually a reducing elbow, it looks like. Flange connections, reducer, and then you've got your pipe sections, and then you've got the nozzle out here. And they would have a balancing box off to the side on the one side, so you could balance it, because trying to steady these and balance these by hand, there's no way. You can imagine the force and the pressure. This water would shoot hundreds of feet up into the air and erode the bank. Just to give you an idea, it's like a 16-inch, I think. 16-inch pipe, 18-inch pipe. And then if you look over here, this one's got the handle. Joshua Henley Ironwork. SF. The nozzles. This is what they use to hydraulic placer mining. Hydraulic meaning fluid. All placer mining is hydraulic, but specifically using hoses. And you're using head pressure. Cariboo Hydraulic Mining Company. Blacksmith shop. Oh, drag lines. Nice. Oh yeah, drag lines. I love drag lines. Drag lines are great. These are an old style of excavation. So you have a tag winder, right? That's called a tag winder. It's attached to here. And then you've got your main line, right? Your block or your whip line. Block being the one that you see. It looks like a big block. And the whip line is the one, they call it a headache ball. It's got that little ball. It looks like a wrecking ball with a hook on it. What they would do if they wanted to excavate underwater, they have these various different attachments that they can use, depending on if they need to break soil up, excavate a certain way or excavate another way, right? I'd imagine that's for breaking soil up. That shows you the backhoe shovel, the action, the dumping, how it scoops up. And then it doesn't dump over, it dumps under. They don't use drag lines anymore. Now they use clam buckets, which is a whole different thing. I'll show you. It's similar, but just basically instead of the drag line bucket, it's a clam bucket. It still uses a tag winder and everything else. Pile drivers, marine construction guys, dredging, they all use those heavy, like every day, all day. This is the boiler. So this would have powered the pumps. It's all riveted too, back in the day. No welding back then. Rivet stand for holding rolled sheet metal as the rivets. Oh yeah, you can see, yeah. So it'd be for putting rivets in. You see the shivs, right? These are called shivs. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 parts. That's the attachment for the nozzle. That circular piece with the hole in it. The knuckles join the gun to the pipeline, and the elbows are obviously for making turns. You have 90-degree elbows and 45-degree elbows. This one is the slip roller. This is a reducer. It's wider down here than it is up here. Same with that one. So just get the implements, right? Bucket, boiler, another bucket, ripper or cultivator, I guess you'd call it. Oh, walking trail, 50 meters. Isn't this a cool stop? What I wanted to say, guys, for this, the Bullion Pit was washed away by humans with hydraulic placer mining, and they were washing the dirt away, right? All that dirt on the side of the mountain, placer diggings, washing all that out. The Bullion Pit was washed out by hydraulic placer mining, and the Bullion Pit is only 2 kilometers and 400 feet deep. The Bullion Pit is like J.B. Hobson's like headstone, basically. Like, not actually, but like this man funneled all of his like life's work into like making this work out. The CPR, the rich CPR barons could extract as much gold as they from it. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys like what the chasm looked like and what the Bullion Pit looked like, because they're basically like the same thing, but one was done by nature and one was done with humans. And this took like 60, 70 years. And there's still people with excavators. Like, this is an active mine site, so you can't go painting. This trail is just a fraction of the 37 kilometers that Bullion placers hand dug between the mid-1930s and 40s to channel water to the monitors at the bottom of their vast hydraulic pit. As a result, this trail has a convening grain between 9 to 18 inches per 1,000 feet. Every mile, 1.6 kilometers, a small cabin would have been built to house the ditch tenders, whose job it was to walk the full length of the ditch line, removing debris and keeping an eye out on the water flow. A private telephone line was also installed so that tenders could keep in contact with the mine foreman. Oh, the remnants. Remnants of the old... Wow, the canal. Oh, I love BC. They did a good job here. Okay, guys, so this is the canal that they used to ferry the water to the hydraulic mines. I was showing you that dam at Moorhead Lake. I wasn't sure. This is the remnants, guys. They hand dug this. The original control gates. These are the original control gates, guys. Right here. These 2 gates from the Bullion Pit. So these gates is how they would have controlled the water flow to the monitors. And you can actually see the bolts. There's how they built it. Yeah, they used bolts. Nails. I can see a nail sticking out there.
This was built in like the 1890s, guys. And it's actually not in bad shape, considering it's just wood that's been sitting outside for 130 years. You can see even how they braced it, the frame. So this trail is the trail they hand dug for the canals. And J.D. Hobson, he was the engineer, so he engineered all of this. Because the CPR owned it, but they don't know how to mine. The CPR executives, barons, don't know anything about mining. So they hired him, and he was like one of the best in California during the California gold rush and stuff. So they figured get him up here and let him go to town on his engineering. Old road to Quesnel Forks, old Bullion town site, the Bullion Pit, the Quesnel River. Horizontal tunneling to reach gold that was located deep in the hills. Miners were forced to build tunnels. The sides and the roof, which were supported by heavy timbers. Rock and gravel would then be removed, either using wheelbarrows or narrow track minecart rails. You can see the beam, right? Horizontal timber. It's notched. There's nail in there. It's collapsing though, look at that. You can see the boards are collapsing. Totally blown out. Shaft is obviously sealed because you're not going in there. It'd be suicidal. Braced. Oh yeah, you can see the roof is like hole in the roof there. So that would have been the track. And then that's the little mining cart. Industrial railroads. Easton Car Construction, Easton, PA. This is the other cart, right? It's powered, the powered cart. Okay guys, so that was it for the Bullion Pit. This is the Bullion Pit. Really, really good, really good information here, guys. Really cool stop. If you want to spend some time here and learn a little bit about hydraulic placer mining, I highly recommend it. So now we're gonna head to Likely, go check out Likely and Quesnel Lake, and then see where we go from there.
Lots of merchants here. It's right on the Quesnel River. It's one of the only ghost towns that's still like preserved quite well. So, little 18-kilometer detour. So the way there's 3 Quesnel names: Quesnel Dam, which was Likely, which had its name changed. Quesnel Forks. This is the forks of the river, right? Where the 2 rivers meet. And then Quesnel Mouth, which is now Quesnel, the city of Quesnel, but it was initially called Quesnel Mouth because it's at the mouth of the Quesnel River. There's a hydraulic monitor here too. Look, little baby ones. Little baby monitors. The little black ones, right? See, that's the nozzle. Same setup, guys. Just slightly different. Cariboo Gold Rush Trail. Okay, so this is Quesnel Lake. Got some old artifacts here we're going to go take a look at. We are here. Likely's here. This is the original Gold Rush Trail, right up to Cedar Point. It's the 4th largest lake in BC at depths more than 1,500 feet, the 5th deepest in the world, formed by a glacier in the last ice age, and it's the deepest known lake of its kind, having over 500 miles of coastline. So, the Star Steam Drill. The steam-powered drill manufactured by Star Drilling Machine Company of Akron, Ohio, started production of self-propelled drilling rigs in 1900, believed to be the model number 18. This rig is capable of drilling well over 1,000 feet, but when using gold exploration, it would rarely have to drill further than 50 or 60
usually to bedrock or water level. During the time spent there were usually 4 men employed: the operator who ran the drill, but who also acted as a mechanic, the painter who collected the test samples, as well as the records, and the fireman who fed wood and water to the boilers, as well as lubricated the machinery. The crown shiv, drilling line, the baling line, derrick, rope socket, but you can see, right, the various pieces of the drill. And then the large steam shovel on display here is one of two purchased by the Consolidated Cariboo Hydraulic Mining Company from the Vulcan Ironworks Company of Toledo, Ohio in 1906. It was shipped disassembled by rail to Ashcroft, where it was then loaded on freight wagons and brought to nearby Spanish Lake. You can see the boiler in the back, right, for the steam. The drums. The old bucket, the rope. Vertical mine shaft. At times, the gold was deep underground in ancient creek beds. To reach it, the miners built vertical shafts that, once reaching bedrock, would branch out and follow the leads. This work was extremely hazardous and cave-ins were fairly common. To remove gravel from the shaft, a miner would crank the windlass, which had a rope and 2 buckets on it. This would be the windlass. As one bucket was filled, the other was emptied. This device was also set up to help move water settled from the bottom of the shaft. The little cabin. Water wheel and sluice. As the surface gold became depleted, miners were forced to explore deeper workings, usually by driving tunnels or sinking shafts into the earth. Needing to pump groundwater from their shafts, the miners used technology dating back to Romans, who brought to the Cariboo by Cornish tin miners. Cornish wheel, right? The water wheel, the grist mill, everything, right? You can see the buckets. We've covered this before. This is the dewatering, right? They'd have groundwater coming in all the time. So this is how they dewatered everything. So this is where these things were. You couldn't mine underground in these underground placer deposits like this. There's no way, absolutely no way you could do that. And then the sluice, right, to raise stuff up from the frame, or raise stuff up from down below. Yeah, constructing a water wheel is not an easy task. So anyways, you guys have seen the 2 underground placer mines here. I gotta get back in the truck because I'm getting eaten alive here.
Alrighty, so as you can see, this is the view apparently of Sasquatch Prospector window. So we finished Likely. We did not go to Quesnel Forks. BC's roads, as per usual, are impassable for most people.
Alrighty guys, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Sasquatch Prospector out.